is more general stuff, but couldn't help but notice what's going on with Far Cry 6. It received its official reveal last week. It's been a pretty bumpy ride for Ubisoft. From the craziness of a new pet system allowing you to fight alongside a wiener dog or a crocodile, to the explosions and first-person gunplay you'd expect in a Far Cry title, seemed all was going according to plan until one article from The Gamer caught traction, which stated that the game was, quote, not political, end quote. The interview shows that Ubisoft was aiming to pay homage to guerrilla fighting, but is not making any particular political statements on the status of Cuba or any locations for that matter. This led to confusion across the internet and in turn forced a written letter from narrative director Navid Kavari. It says, our story is political. A story about modern revolution must be. There are hard, relevant discussions in Far Cry 6 about conditions that led to the rise of fascism in a nation, the cost of imperialism, forced labor, the need for free and fair elections, LGBTQ plus rights, and more within the context of Yara, a fictional island in the Caribbean. My goal was to empower our team to be fearless in the story we were telling, and we worked incredibly hard to do this over the last 5 years. We also tried to be very careful about how we approached our inspirations, which include Cuba, but also our countries, or also other countries around the world that we have experienced political revolutions in their histories. In our approach, we made sure to seek creators and collaborators for our team who can speak personally to the history and cultures of the regions we were inspired by. We also brought on experts and consultants to examine the game story multiple times over the course of the project to make sure it was being told with sensitivity. It is not for me to decide if we succeeded, but I can say we absolutely tried. The conversations and research done on the perspectives of those who have fought in revolutions in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and beyond are absolutely reflected in our story and characters. But if anyone is seeking a simplified, binary political statement specifically on the current political climate in Cuba, they won't find it. I am from a family that has endured the consequences of revolution. I have debated revolution over the dinner table my entire life. I can only speak for myself, but it is a complex subject that should never be boiled down to one quote. What players will find is a story that's point of view attempts to capture the political complexity of a modern present-day revolution within a fictional context. We have attempted to tell a story with action, adventure, and heart, but that also isn't afraid to ask hard questions. Far Cry is a brand that in its DNA seeks to have mature, complex themes balanced with levity and humor. One doesn't exist without the other, and we have attempted to achieve this balance with care. My only hope is that we are willing to let the story speak for itself before forming hard opinions on its political reflections. Thank you for reading. Navid Kavari, narrative director at Far Cry 6. Now, Ubisoft has had a history of this. In 2019, they said the Division 2 is not making any political statements because the team believes the games didn't have anything to say. Curiously, Far Cry 5, I was reading, received some criticism for not being political enough and towing the line so delicately that they really never quite say anything. So this isn't the first time Ubisoft's found it in hot water, but they've played this back and forth game for years. We're not political. They want to have their cake and eat it too, right? They want to say we're not political. They want to be marketable because some people go, I don't want to deal with politics. I don't want politics in my game. But they confront these themes that inherently seem political, that, you know, if you're not having something to say, by the way, I'm not talking the polarizing left-right argument that is in the United States. I'm talking generally, like if there's nothing for your game to say, then what are you doing as a creator of art? I feel like that's a genuine question that needs to be asked sometimes, because when I do my own personal writing, I mean, it is absolutely inspired by modern culture, just as many other projects have come before and will come after. There's things that happen in our world that you think of and you're like, how do I not drive this into my game world, but take that and create this thought, this process, this theme, this piece within the game world or within a story. So I have some general thoughts on it, and I'll kind of lay it at that. What do you fellas think of Ubisoft finally kind of pulling the Band-Aid off? Like, we've known this for a while. Their games are politically charged to some extent, which is fine in my opinion. But the kind of hiding away and pretending it's not, finally coming out and just being like, our game is political. Like, clearly the PR was saying, hey, make sure no one knows this is political. Like, it's not. Just make sure you don't say it is. Now we're seeing what's happening. What do you guys make of this?
Woohoo!
Go ahead, Lord.
I got it. Look, man, I mean, this was a good one on the docket. You know, I might be in the minority here, so I'm going to say my opinion as far as this. I always feel with gaming is art form to me, right? So I always believe in the developer or creator's right to expression. whatever it may be.
Yep.
Even if I disagree, because at the end of the day, it's a game and we have the right to choose if we're going to support it or not. Now, to your question in reference to, them towing the line and them touching on things and, subjects that may be current and relevant and then maybe not, going in and on that. I understand that argument to an extent. But to me, I'm at this point now where it's like, I'm always going to be pro developer in the way that they should have the right to express themselves, right? And us as consumers have to say, hey, that ain't it, and I ain't supporting it, or you know what, you're dead right with that, and I'm on. So with this one, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a Far Cry guy, so I'm not really haven't played the series, so I'm really not in this position of expertise to comment on how they do their games because I really haven't played them. To be honest, I've never played a Far Cry game, but no, I've never. That's one of the ones that slipped through. So I have a different perspective here. But for me, I'm always going to lean in the developers right now to people who are going through that struggle or these relevant things and they have a sensitivity to it. And they say, hey, man, you're not speaking on or you're not depicting it correctly. Then I do believe in accuracy. I do believe in, telling it correctly. If there's things, if you're going to go from a historical, line for line, 7 years ago kind of thing, then yeah, you kind of need to be accurate unless you inherently say this is our version of it and not like some people say that this is our interpretation of a specific time period, that kind of thing. But that's where I'm at. I'm very actually curious for both of you as far as how you guys feel in this specific subject with Far Cry, because a person I've never played any game in the series.
Carrick, let's hear what you guys say first, and then I'm sure I'll chime in eventually.
Well, they do start every one of their games with "this is fictional."
Okay.
They have a disclaimer. I would say that what's going on right now is you have a bunch of people making a game, and then you have somebody saying, hey, I want to know, even though you're Martha, I want to know why Bob made the game. Usually talking to the PR person and trying to figure out why the lead made the game a lot of times and trying to pick their brain apart. And so the PR person says, no, it's not political. But what they're really saying is... I should clarify real quick,
by the way, the interview was with this same creative narrative director. I don't know if that change anything.
Yeah, no, it doesn't change anything because this is the third time it's happened. So every time they do this, one of the things that they're doing is they're stating it doesn't believe or agree in a particular bad point.
Okay.
Like if there's a killer in the game who's killing children, you can be dumb and you can say, do you believe that he should be able to kill children? You can be an idiot if you want, and you want to ask that and you want to waste your time asking that, you can. But I think these guys saying it's not political, that was dumb. I also think sometimes we're sort of dumb to ask because you're just like, of course it is. Whether even the creator doesn't believe it is, it can be. For example, I can create something and not know it's political or not have political leanings, but when it comes out and people read it, it becomes political for whatever reason. That can also happen. Additionally, there's a thing about questioning somebody. And there's a very, very cool skit about questioning somebody and leaving them nowhere to go. And I'm going to change it slightly because it isn't current in how it's said. But a comedian once said, one of the worst questions you can get is, have you beat your dog lately? Now, there's no way to answer it correctly because they are already interpreting that you have, at the past, beat your dog. And are you still doing it? You can't say, well, I've never done it because they've already asked as if you have. And so there's this whole way of asking a question where you can make it sound like the person, regardless of their answer, is wrong or is in. And that's what we do in gaming. If somebody says it's not political, guess what? That's political. Because if you say it's not political, you have immediately de facto made it political in some way. I will challenge anybody who wants to say that it's not political because you're killing people, which is at some point going to come up in politics. If you are killing people as the main character, in some way it's political. Even if you're going to say it's not, Duke Nukem, at some point you have to look at it. And by the way, Duke Nukem was one of the first games that had, like, I don't know if you guys remember, but you'd run into Duke Nukem and they had O.J. Simpson on the TV screen in the bar, and all this kind of crazy stuff. Sexism can happen, those kind of things. But I think it's a weird conversation. I think it's one of those type of situations where you can't win because, like you said, Far Cry 5 wasn't political enough, and you're like, there you go. That shows where we are right now. Either somebody's bitching because you are too. That's the thing, is there isn't a dividing. There isn't a line.
Right.
And there isn't a group of people who are like, this is the group and the only group that matters. Everybody can ask a question and you can't answer it right. So I think they should have just back then just been like, well, it's political as the actions that you take and that you see are in it. We're just not saying you're a good guy for killing people. I think smart people would have taken that already. Joseph is not a good guy. He's not in 5. He's not a good guy. Would you have ever thought he was a good guy? No. And if you do, you have other issues that are outside of the game even. That's more on, that's a psychological thing. So I don't know. I hate the discussion because I'm just like, they shouldn't have said no. They shouldn't. And they probably, I mean, should they have been asked? I don't know. But I mean, you know me, I'm not going to ask.
Right.
Like, because I would have already gone, I go into every game thinking it's a game and that I might get something out of it.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
Pretty much as far as I go.
Every iteration of the series tends to have something like this where...
Every iteration of the series has involved something. The first one was on a paradise island taken over by an evil corporation that was, and then 2 was Africa, which had you go in there and getting dysentery and all this shit. 3 was in the 3 or 4 was in the Himalayas with a terrorist organization, against Overseer. 4 was sort of the same thing. 3 and 4 are this kind of thing. 3
was on the
only
island,
one that. There was only 2 that didn't. There was Blood Dragon, which is in the future, but it was also about consumerism, which is another thing. It was not only consumerism, it actually was a 1980s rip. So you actually had Michael Behan from Terminator as the main guy, and it was a bunch of Terminator jokes. That was Blood Dragon. And then Primal is probably the only one that wasn't political because it was cavemen. I mean, well, political, I guess, if somebody steals too many fires from you.
The start of man, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it sucks. I get why people ask sometimes, but sometimes I'm just like, geez.
Yeah, you got to use your head and assume sometimes.
Yeah. Or told all your team, be like, just say yes, but we don't agree with any of the bad shit that happens. At that point, allow the creator to create.
Well, yeah,
like Cognito said, like, allow him to create and then you judge on that. But we are way past that now in society. Yeah. Like, I don't think we're at that point anymore.
Yeah, man.
Exactly.
Personally.
Yeah.
Maddie, I'm just curious because you played most of the iterations.
I've played most since
all of
3. And actually, I played all since 2.
3.
Right. You're feeling. I just gotta ask because I'm completely new to shit. Like, is it something that you feel they told line and they need to just get ahead of it, or like where you at with that?
See, my perspective has changed a lot on this stuff because I've started to write more and more, like creative writing, where you start to realize, like, as you are making something, it's always going to come from
somewhere else,
a life event. Yeah, it's going to come from another game where you're like, I like what they did here. Like, how do I create this same type of situation? What do I put there? So as I look at Far Cry now, it's like, I'm not sitting here, by the way, I want to make it clear to the audience. Like, I don't sit here and be like, you've got to say something. Right. But when you present something kind of like Far Cry 5, Doomsday Theorists, cult leaders, Midwest America, I think it was. Like, I think there's clearly showing that they're basing it off of something they've seen before and kind of creating this universe. And it's not that they have to say something, but it's like you've now set yourself up where it looks like there's the opportunity to say something. Okay. So what I find oftentimes with Far Cry is you get these very preachy antagonists that don't really say anything. It's very filler. They kind of drop into the background. Like in Far Cry 5, you just get abducted a bunch of times and you'll get monologues and then you're like, I don't know what you were even talking about, and they're gone. And you like wake up in a field. So for me, it's one of those things where they don't really try, and I find it frustrating because I would rather you try, and kind of like what they're saying here with 6, actually. Try. We don't know if it'll be good or not, if it'll nail what it's trying to represent or reflect, but try. Because then you're saying you have the potential to say something meaningful rather than Far Cry 5, which I thought was a very bumpy road. It was kind of just ebbing and flowing. It was in existence. It was just kind of neutral. So yeah, I like I said, as I write more and more, I just feel like, you see these things happening around you, right, and you look at for me, I'm creating this whole universe. So I look at the politics I've written, the the government I've written, the religions I've written and stuff. And it's like, you look at Christianity, you just Catholicism in general, you look at everything across the board, democratic philosophies and so on and so forth. And you're like, what is that in my world? How is it reflected? What are the changes there? What's ideal? Because then you start to tap into like technology. What has changed in my world technology wise that can maybe back up some of these bills that have been proposed in our world? And you sort of evolve those ideas more and more. So just, I know I'm not some like big famous writer. I'm sure my thoughts don't take much merit for people, but just as someone who does a lot of creative writing on that front and universe building, it's like, yeah, you definitely, I can say firsthand, and I'm sure many in our audience can say firsthand, like, yeah, you look around and you just naturally see things. Otherwise, you're just throwing shit at the paper and just kind of evolving as it goes. And I've done that. You just sort of riff on paper, and it's like, it eventually starts to come from somewhere. You start to tap into something. So, yeah, I'm glad that they're just kind of pulling the Band-Aid off and just saying they're doing it, man.
Fair enough.